Good morning, David Lapp and Chris Purcell here, coming to you live from our offices in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Today is March the 4th. Today we're going to be talking about accountability and how accountability can seem like a bad thing to a lot of people. But if you actually understand accountability and you understand the benefits of accountability and it gets used properly, how it can really be a good thing. And we're going through the five dysfunctions of a team from Patrick Lencioni, and the dysfunction is the avoidance of accountability. So as we kick it off here, Chris, anything that comes to your mind around accountability? Why not? What's good? What's bad? How do people usually misinterpret it? I mean, the floor is open.
Right. I'm going to take it theological for a second, and I'm going to say, for me, accountability, I think, is deeply connected to what a lot of Protestant churches acknowledge during Lent, in particular, where we understand our human frailty, we understand kind of the reality of our humanness, and that days are numbered and so forth. For me, accountability points to shared responsibility. It points to that idea that we have this connection between one another, where it helps us to understand through the community ways of living and acknowledging what God has created for us. And I think that transfers into business too, where we can be doing good work, where we're accountable to one another, where we don't need some necessarily a leader standing over us saying, oh, do this, don't do this, and all the time, where we can do that for each other because the cause that we're working for, because the purpose that we have in this world and in this community matters. And it matters how we do that together and how we speak into one another. And I think that's kind of a big part of the goal of today, is understanding that we can't do it alone.
Yeah. And there's a quote, I forget who said it, but it's if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I think in order to go together, you have to have that accountability in place. You have to have that trust, that teamwork, or there's no way you're going to go far as a team if you're not willing to be accountable, to give an answer for the questions that people bring up. Uh, Before we go too much further into that, I want to bring up the scripture verse for today, which is out of Proverbs 27:5 and 6. It says, "Open rebuke is better than love carefully concealed. Faithful are the wounds of a friend, but the kisses of an enemy are deceitful." And I think that speaks into, if we're able to be open and honest about where things are at, and talk about that, and there's nothing worse than thinking somebody has your back, and then you find out they're talking about you behind your back, and they're tearing it down. This That doesn't bring trust. It doesn't bring accountability. It really just brings a lot of distrust in that process. But I think true accountability is being willing to openly talk about it, to openly, what is actually going on. How do we address this, and be on the same team together, against the issue.
Right. And I think for me, what's really important here too, reading this scripture, is that it's not an either or based on these examples, right? It's not about we're either openly rebuking or we're quietly loving and so forth. It's saying that if you were to compare these two, this is how it would look, and it would look a little funky, and it wouldn't align really with what you're looking for. But I think we have to find that balance. I think we have to find loving rebuke and do so out in front of people. I think the thing I've become really comfortable with over my life is the idea that God only uses me, and even organizations can only use me with as willing and honest as I'm able to be about myself. As in, if I hide myself, or if I'm hiding myself from others, they won't be able to work with me and through me. So accountability also starts with just being real and being present, and acknowledging the realities around us.
Yeah. And sometimes accountability can be tough. Sometimes you have to do the hard things and actually do things that you don't necessarily like to do. But in order to walk forward, there has to be that conversation. There has to be that two-way communication. And accountability goes both ways. If you have a mandate or a call from God to do something, that call, there demands accountability to that call to God as well. And sometimes we get caught up in our other people's opinions, trying to sway what God called us to. And I'm not saying you don't listen to other people's. If people, I actually encourage you to invite people to speak into your life, but not every voice that tries to speak into your life will have the same weight. And sometimes you have to look at the voices that are coming and trying to bring accountability. And in that process, if you're able to then also push back and have a healthy dialogue in that and actually have a conversation, you can go a lot further than if you have a voice that is trying to be dominant, and all they're trying to do is to prove a point or to prove you wrong. That's not accountability. That's just somebody trying to push their opinion on you. And I'm not saying you shouldn't listen to what they have to say, but take it back to a group that you trust, a group of brothers that you can bounce the ideas off of, and allow people that you trust to speak into the situation. Because if I'm discerning something from God, and somebody that I don't know as well, points something out, I don't want to just brush that off as an issue that they have. Neither do I give that the same weight as I do a group of trusted brothers that I meet with on a regular basis. And I would then bring that to them and say, here's what this person said about me. What do you see in that? Is there truth to that? And invite them to speak into it from an angle of, these are people that I walk with, these are people that I do life with. They know my heart, they know how I think, and how does what this individual said, and I think that's a powerful form of accountability, where if we can have that group around us that we allow to speak into our life, we can really make a difference, or we can be confident that what God is showing us is really what we believe God is showing us is actually what resonates with them as well.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And and then I think there's even a further step that we can take beyond that, right? So anytime we're receiving something, whether it be from those close people or from those other people, our accountability really lives within ourselves and our relationship with God too. So at the end of the day, we have to take it with full honesty back to God as well, and really reflect on it, pray on it, and discern it,
Mhm.
and really try to make it more important, more impactful, I should say, to how we receive it and how we kind of sit with it to some extent. And I think that's the wisdom in spending time in the presence of something, and allowing God to be cohabitating in that presence, because it creates, I always kind of make this comparison between reaction and kind of a more well thought out idea, where uh, we don't want to react to those things in this negative way. And I think that removes all accountability, and it doesn't even give anyone the ability to have a voice in our lives. And we want to encourage that, like you said. We want to allow people, whether it be prophetically or otherwise, to speak into us and really see things that we can't. That's one of the joys of community.
Yeah.
But we also want to be aware of how people might be leading us astray.
And you just said that's the joys of a community, and it really is. It's really what gives the community the power, is the two-way accountability, where
Hmm.
I'm not just going to take everything that you say as the gospel truth. Neither can I just say anything that I want to without actually having brothers, or people speak into my life and saying, okay, how are you basing that off of? Make sure it's not coming from a wound in your heart that is then projecting your issues out on somebody else, and there's no accountability for what you say or how you act, or anything like that. I think that's very important as we go through life, that we're able to, yes, share our hearts, but also be ready to then give an answer for why we believe why we believe what we believe.
Yeah. Nope. I totally agree. Um, why do you think, a lot of times when we're being accountable to one another, there's this fine line between criticism and accountability and just kind of speaking into someone. Why do you think that happens? Like, what's your sense? What do
Well,
you
I
see?
think if people take accountability as criticism, there's a trust issue there as well. And if you can trust the person's heart that is bringing the rebuke or the trying to share something with you, if you can trust their heart, you can also receive what they're trying to show you. And I think if somebody tries to bring accountability without that pre-existing relationship or that trust, it can come across as an accusation or as a trying to one up somebody else, and it can be completely mistaken. Where if we can actually be open with each other, get to know each other on a deeper level, so when an accountability issue comes up, and even if I might not say it right with our previous relationship, you'll hear it differently than if we don't have that previous relationship.
Right. Right. It's very true. And this is all our kind of modern context of trying to understand what these relationships look like in today's world, right? That I'm sure that's evolved over time, and the word accountability didn't even always exist in some ways, where like we wouldn't have seen it as accountability as much as just co-living and coexisting in so many ways, where every person had their role. But in a I would say, I don't know if this is negative or positive about capitalism and things about our society, but the reality is that in today's world where, we can jump from one thing to the next, a new career every other day if we want to, that kind of thing. I think we have to hone our skills in being together with one another around the fact that we see the human on the other side, that we see the face of God and all the people that we work with, and that our accountability is not necessarily to that person, but to the spirit within that person. Our accountability is to one another as a part of serving the greater good, and just being a part of this beautiful creation that God has blessed us to exist within as we prepare for our day to arrive in heaven.
Yeah, I think another way of looking at it is our accountability while we're on earth is to give it everything that God put within us while we're here,
Hmm.
and leave our gift at the altar, if you will, altar of earth, and actually make an impact with our gift that God has entrusted to us, and make a difference while we're here. I've heard it said, and I believe it, that the wealthiest place of any community is the graveyard, because
Mm,
there's so many untapped potential, so many untapped visions, so much untapped potential, so much that people just took along to the grave because they either didn't know how to communicate their ideas, or they were shot down and they took it personal, or whatever reason these ideas were never fulfilled, they took them along to the grave, and we don't know what we'd missed because they were never tried, or they were never able to bring that dream or that vision to fulfillment.
right. Right. It's an interesting point. We in church this week we studied Job 13, and when Job is he's talking to Zophar and saying like, "Hey, you've come after me in this moment. You're kind of attacking me in a low point in my life, and then you're using God as a shield. You're kind of saying that God can't do these things." A couple of chapters earlier, Job said, or Zophar says to Job essentially, "What did you do to deserve this?" And I think when I think about that when it comes to accountability too, because I don't want someone else to receive that message from me. I don't want to be a Zophar in someone's life where I look at where someone even remotely receives, "What did you do to deserve this?"
Yeah.
Because I don't think it's that clear cut. And I love Job's wisdom in response to kind of say, like, it really isn't that clear. You're like, give it to God, take it to God, let God really work in this. And even in our relationships, even in our desire or our responsibility to be accountable to one another, at the end of the day, if we can't take it to God, and we can't take all of ourselves to God with full honesty, even lament and struggle, then we're not going to allow God to use us in the right way, and really allow us to be present in this world, and kind of use this humanist technique, if you will, to ensure that we're communally working better together in whatever spaces we are, whether it be work, church, or
Yeah.
just life in general.
Yeah. And there's a lot of people, they try to make a difference between work and church, but it's like, in God's kingdom, we're to serve
Mm-hmm.
24/7. It's not Sunday
Mm-hmm.
morning for a few hours and then the rest is secular. And that's for ourselves. It's like, no, we're here to make a difference for God's kingdom while we're here. And that's an accountability that I have on myself, that every hour of every day, my responsibility to God is to give my best to him and just to serve him in that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, from a leadership position, how do we work then when someone is considered a leader, when the accountability structure, like we're kind of talking about horizontal accountability, where peer to peer there's an accountability structure and we're working together and talking into each other. But as leaders, when it's a more vertical structure, how do we then have compassion along with expectations in that work of accountability?
I think it's important to establish what a leader is. If you think you're a leader but you don't have any followers, you're simply out for a walk. And I don't think it's possible for a leader to have followers without being willing to be accountable to the
Mm,
followers and provide accountability to the followers, because leadership goes both ways. I mean, accountability goes both ways. As a leader, if you want people to actually follow in your steps or follow and come into the mission of what you're doing, into submission or into the mission of what you're doing, there has to be that accountability both ways, where you know I don't have any value for people that want to be a part of the organization but they refuse to do what the mission of the organization calls them to do. Not Don't hear me wrong, I'm not saying there's no value in the people, I'm saying they can't bring value to the mission. If they want to serve the mission, they have to come into the vision of the mission to serve it, or they're really of little value to the mission. If they come into a mission and try to bring their own agenda into that mission, how can they further the mission if they're not willing to be accountable to the mission and actually serve the mission? And
mhm,
as a leader, I have to be accountable to anybody that wants to hold me accountable. And
mhm,
I choose to live my life that way. If there's somebody that sees something in my life that is not lining up with the mission that God has for me, that is not honoring to God, I will point that out to me. I'm saying anybody. If you want to reach out to me and say, "Hey, you see X, Y, and Z in my life that is not honoring to God," and you have reason to believe that I am intentionally, trying to deceive people or anything like that, point it out. I'm open to that.
David, that's a really good point too, I think. And to reframe it a little bit, it's you're kind of saying for yourself as a practice, you need to ensure that you approach relationships where you are willing to be accountable yourself. Not just that you expect accountability from someone else in your life, but that you're willing to be accountable yourself. And I think there's a really deep truth to that, where we we won't successfully work in this loving accountability and kind of this healthy conflict if we can't first allow ourselves to be okay living in that space and receiving that. We can't send it if we're not willing to receive it, right? We
A,
have to be on that page.
a lot of people see accountability as criticism, as condemnation, as trying to hold something over somebody else. But accountability is really empowering if you're able to go there and allow God to use you in that way.
Hmm.
And the way I look at life is, if I get offended, that's my issue. If you say something trying to hold me accountable and that offends me personally, that's my issue. Why did that fiery dart of the enemy get through my shield of faith? How did that fiery dart of the enemy penetrate my heart, that I got offended, and then I try to blame you? And in that process, I have to own up to anything that gets through, because the Bible says the shield of faith will quench, what is it, 80% of the fiery darts of the enemy?
Hmm.
Or is it all of them? So
Hmm.
if a fiery dart gets through, that's my issue that it got through, because my shield of faith wasn't able to stand and say, no, that one's not
Hmm.
coming through. That one's going to God. And I realize that this is an unpopular mindset for a lot of people, but that is the way I try to live my life.
Mm. Thanks for sharing into that. That's you have clearly have a deep sense of your own personal accountability that you feel is necessary to make this walk.
Mhm.
We have a couple of comments coming in.
I
Thanks, Matthew, for
I just
commenting.
realized I have 11 o'clock Zoom call. We were a little late getting started here, so we're gonna have to
It's all
wrap
right.
because it is 11 o'clock. But
Perfect.
I am accountable to that. But we are 20 minutes into it. So anything you want to share here as we wrap it up real quick?
No, thanks. We had a few comments. Thanks for the comments. Would love to hear more about what you have to say. We'll try and address any questions in the next episode and when we get to return.
Yeah, and if you have any specific comments that you want us to address, click the link on the description. That'll come into our forum. We'll take a look at it, and we're happy to share our opinions on what we see in that comment. So, yeah, God bless you. Thanks for joining us. Thank you, Chris.